Hi, it's Lee from ColouringQueen.net and I hope you're having a great day today. I just want to, before we start today's crime and colouring video, I just want to say thank you to all of those that wished me a happy birthday last week. David ended up taking the day off and we spent the day in the Sunshine Coast hinterland, and we took Buddy with us, of course. Went to lunch, went to morning tea, basically ate a lot, and and it was a lovely day. And I also have some new Minnie Mouse slippers as well. And I also opened up those lovely books that I got from Amazon Japan. I posted a review of one last week. I'll put a link up here on the video if you want to check it out. And the other two are coming. They're also little postcard books that I treated myself for my birthday, because I had this Amazon Japan gift card that's been burning a hole in my pocket and I really wanted to spend it, so I did. So there we go. So let's get on to today's crime and colouring story. I'm going to be colouring in Johanna Basford's Rooms of Wonder book, and I'm colouring the pineapple picture because it was my idea in our Facebook group to colour this picture as a buddy colour, and of course I'm the last one to do it. So anyway, so that's what I'm colouring in today with my Caran watercolours, my Neocolors. These crayons are going to last forever and a day, and I'm going to colour over these with my Artex coloured pencils. So let's get into today's story. Now, I've told you stories before about robberies and even bank robberies, but this one takes the cake. This is the largest bank robbery in history, but there's a few things about this bank robbery that's actually amazing. And it's the simple things that meant that instead of getting away with $1 billion, they got away with millions instead. And there's also the suggestion that this wasn't a person or a number of individuals that robbed a bank for their own means, but it was actually a country that robbed a bank. So today's story takes place in Bangladesh, and it's in the heart of its financial system, the Bangladesh Central Bank. It's tucked away in the bustling city of Dhaka, and this beige and green government building, it looks old and unassuming from the outside. But as you approach, you'll notice the sign bearing the words Bangladesh Bank and the abundance of palm trees that surround the entrance. And if you're lucky enough to be granted access to the restricted 10th floor, you'll find yourself in a small room filled with high-level staff and loads of humming computers loaded with Swift software. Now, Swift stands for the Society for Worldwide Interbank Financial Telecommunications. Now, that's a mouthful, and that's why we call it Swift instead. And it's responsible for securely transferring payment instructions between banks worldwide. Now, in 2015, Swift linked over 11,000 financial institutions in more than 200 countries and territories, exchanging on average over 32 million messages per day. And each financial institution has a unique code to identify it within the system from those other 10,999 financial institutions. And Swift doesn't actually transfer the money, but rather it creates a payment order which instructs the bank to transfer that money and securely. Chances are, if you've transferred money internationally or between banks, you have used the Swift system. So the small room on the 10th floor of the Bangladesh Central Bank is where all these Swift messages are sent and received, and they allow money to flow in and out of Bangladesh. Now, to ensure the security of these messages, a printer inside the room prints out hard copies of all SWIFT messages sent and received by banks in the country. So with so much money at stake, it's crucial to have a backup of all transactions, not only a soft copy backup, but also a hard copy. But as you stand in this small room surrounded by the hum of the computers and the rustle of papers, you can't help but wonder, what might happen if something were to go wrong? Will the systems hold up? Will the hard copy backups be enough to prevent disaster? And is this a foolproof system? And is it really secure? Well, if the answer was yes to those, we wouldn't be talking today, would we? So weekends in Bangladesh, unlike in Western countries, they fall on a Friday and a Saturday rather than the usual Saturday and Sunday that we may be familiar with. Sunday is actually a regular work day in Bangladesh. And even though weekends fall on a Friday, as it's a bank, there's still some staff on duty. So it was Friday, February the 5th, 2016 at 8:45 a.m. when the manager on duty at the Bangladesh bank noticed that the printer on the 10th floor of the bank was not working. Now, due to the international nature of SWIFT transfers and different time zones, the printer is meant to work 24 hours a day, ensuring that the backup of SWIFT instructions is always being printed. When staff arrive each morning, the tray is checked to make sure what comes through overnight can be processed. Now, it wasn't the first time that the printer had stopped working at the Bangladesh bank, and it wasn't that unusual, quite frankly, that it had given up the ghost. The manager didn't think much of the printer issue. He continued about his day and he hurried off to finish his work so he could attend Friday prayers on time. The next day, when the manager returned to the office for his weekend shift, he checked the printer and found that it was still out of order. When bank workers tried to print the reports manually and override the system, they couldn't. The software on the terminal that connects to the SWIFT network indicated that a critical system file was missing or had been altered. Now, he knew he had to fix this issue before the work week commenced on Sunday, so he received authorization to reboot the computer. Working in a bank, and I've worked in a bank before, it's not as easy as being able to do things yourself. You have to get a number of approvals to do things that alter any sort of computer system. So he got that approval, and as soon as the reboot was done, the printer starts spitting out all of the SWIFT messages from the day before that had been piled up in the system. Now, there were a lot of messages, but among the messages were some that were urgent requests from the New York Federal Reserve Bank, and they were asking for clarification. The Bangladesh Central Bank, like most national central banks, maintained a foreign currency account with the Federal Reserve, and this is to facilitate international transfers and payments. Now, the first urgent request for clarification had been sent on Friday morning Bangladesh time, but the Bangladesh bank hadn't seen them as the printer wasn't working at that time. Now, the New York Federal Reserve wanted the Bangladesh bank to confirm an unusually large number of payment instructions, 35 in fact, that had been received by the Federal Reserve, and the payments were actually enough to completely empty the Bangladesh foreign bank account of its entire balance with them, which totaled over $1 billion. Now, the staff at the Bangladesh bank, they weren't too worried about the messages at first. They knew they hadn't sent the instructions for payment, which was needed to process any transactions. They just assumed that it was a glitch, and the glitch was on the New York Federal Reserve side. And meanwhile, although the working week had started in Bangladesh on the Sunday, it hadn't in New York. And Bangladesh staff just had to wait for the Federal Reserve to open for business on Monday morning, New York time. And as soon as the New York bank was opened, they could contact them and clear up this glitch or this banking error. But what the Bangladesh bank didn't realise was they'd been hacked, and the consequences would be catastrophic, although it could have been far worse if not for a few mistakes made by the very sophisticated thieves. Now, 35 instructions had been sent by the Bangladesh bank via the international SWIFT network to the New York Federal Reserve to transfer a total of $1 billion, and this was to go to bank accounts in Sri Lanka and the Philippines. Now, staff alerted the governor of the Bangladesh Central Bank of this issue, and like his staff, he also believed that the transfers were erroneous. And even still, no matter what they believed, it was clear that the money had been transferred out of their foreign bank account at the Federal Reserve. But on their end, nothing was showing as being debited in their accounts. Now, mistakes occur from time to time and payments can be reversed. So the governor remained calm and he instructed the bank to investigate further. Now, finally, Monday came and the Bangladesh bank managed to discuss the issue with the New York Federal Reserve. And that's when they realised that this was no error. Something had gone terribly wrong. The payment instructions were legitimate. Not only that, the 35 transactions were initiated from inside the small room on the 10th floor of the Bangladesh Central Bank in Dhaka. As news spread throughout the bank, people were just shocked and disbelief, and chaos followed. And the big question on people's mind was this an inside job? Now, fortunately, 30 of those payment instructions to the New York Federal Reserve Bank had been automatically flagged in its system. The instructions were to transfer to funds to a bank in Manila. Now, out of the hundreds of banks in Manila, the thieves had selected one in a street called Jupiter Street. Now, while that might seem innocuous, it was to cost the thieves dearly. Jupiter was automatically flagged in the US system, as it's the name of an Iranian shipping vessel subject to sanctions. And the system didn't catch all of the payments though, and 5 managed to slip through this review process, but at least it did save an estimated $950 million. Investigators soon found that the 5 payment orders that did manage to slip through the system had been paid to banks in the Philippines and Sri Lanka. And as the investigation progressed, more details about the heist were revealed. It was discovered that the hackers had tried to transfer almost $1 billion more, but only managed to transfer the $81 million due to a spelling error in one of the transfer requests. The error had prompted Deutsche Bank to seek clarification, which then led to the discovery of the fraudulent transfers. In Sri Lanka, $20 million was transferred to a charity called the Shalika Foundation, and the founder, Shalika Pereira, thought that this was a genuine donation, but sadly this donation was never made because of a simple spelling mistake. The Shalika Foundation in Colombo was a newly established charity run by Shalika Pereira, and she was the principal of the foundation. The organisation aimed to build homes and provide social services for the impoverished community. And Shalika had been speaking with a Japanese middleman about a potential donation of $20 million for this new charity. And the middleman informed her that for their fee, he and his associates would take 85% of the investment, leaving only 15% for the foundation. And she decided to accept this offer and open an account at the Colombo branch of the Pan-Asian Bank to receive the funds from Japan. Now, when that transfer was made, a bank clerk noticed a spelling mistake in the word foundation, which had actually been misspelled as foundation, missing the O in it in the recipient's name. So upon investigation, Pan Asia Bank discovered that the funds did not originate from Japan, but from Bangladesh. And so the bank was then able to retrieve the entire 20 million from the account. Now, further investigation found that the rest of the money, $81 million, had actually been sent to 4 bank accounts in the Philippines. These accounts had been opened using fake identity documents as early as May 2015, 9 months prior to the cyber attack. And they weren't active, but they had a balance of $500 in each of them. Now, the hackers planned the transfer to the Philippines carefully. They chose a Monday, February the 8th, 2016, and that was Chinese New Year, and it was actually a public holiday in the country. So they planned it really carefully, starting with low staff on the weekend of Friday to Saturday in Bangladesh, then the normal Western weekend of Saturday to Sunday in New York, which would cause more delays, and then finally sending money to the Philippines when it was going to be a public holiday on the Monday, so that all of these banks would be frustrated by the difference in time zones and public holidays and general holidays. So although the Bangladesh Bank sent a message to the Rizal Commercial Banking Corporation, RCBC, in the Philippines to stop the payment and return the funds, the message wasn't actually received until the following day because of this holiday. Now, by then, the funds had actually been processed by the RCBC's branch. Now, once they had the money, the thieves knew they needed to launder it, but this was quite simple for them, as banking institutions in the Philippines had to abide by money laundering legislation. They couldn't use the banks, but they could use the casinos where the laws at that time did not apply. Now, a number of men were tasked with taking money to the casinos to gamble. The stolen cash was gambled using a 2-chip system, where one set of chips was for gambling and the other was for winnings. Only the winning chips could be cashed out, making the money appear legitimate, and the laundered money was then taken home by the players. What investigators noticed was that several plain Chinese-speaking men entered the VIP area of Casino Soler in Manila, following the same routine every day. They would enter the VIP room at 8 o'clock in the morning and gamble until lunchtime, take a break from lunch, and continue gambling until 11:30 at night. And despite betting with enormous amounts of money, the men didn't appear to be wealthy, and staff noticed that they seemed out of place. They didn't act like most gamblers. They didn't have the excitement of having a flutter, and they were actually really emotionless. They weren't happy when they won, they weren't happy when they lost, and their emotional or lack of emotional reaction actually made them stand out in the environment, and also their lack of taking part in the usual ritz and glamour of the casinos. They weren't buying drinks and flirting and having a good time. It was just a routine for them, and it made it look like that they were merely doing a job, a long job, every day. Now, investigators eventually found a Chinese national who helped open the accounts, and he had left the Philippines for China with $30 million in cash, while the rest of the funds were transferred to various accounts at the Soler and Midas casinos. Eventually, $31 million is estimated to have been laundered through those 2 casinos. There was suspicion that the RCBC Bank was involved in the heist, And the bank manager received death threats and was instructed to ignore the large transfers, leading to a bit of suspicion around her involvement. And it was later discovered that the bank's CCTV was disabled around the time of the heist, raising even more suspicion. To some, this made it look like someone from the bank had conspired with the thieves and it was an inside job. But the alternate view was that the bank was basically being set up to make it look like they were involved in a case of misdirection. The Philippines National Bureau of Investigation launched an investigation into the Chinese Filipino businessman and the other 4 individuals who opened the bank accounts. The RCBC was also fined by the Central Bank of Philippines due to its anti-money laundering shortcomings. But this wasn't the work of one rogue bank manager and one client. This heist was so audacious that initially no one believed hackers were involved. And it actually took several weeks to convince various role players, such as the Federal Reserve and SWIFT, that it was indeed a group of hackers who had initiated those 35 transactions in Bangladesh that ended up involving New York, the Philippines, Sri Lanka, you name it. Cybersecurity experts found traces of malware and other evidence that the bank system had been compromised. Now, the investigation also revealed that the hackers had used sophisticated malware which had been specifically designed to target the Bangladesh Central Bank's computer systems. The malware had been installed several months prior to the heist, and the hackers had been monitoring the bank's activities and transactions during that time. They had also created fake accounts in the bank's name, which they used to make the fraudulent transfers look legitimate. And it was finally found how the malware was installed. And it's something that you always need to be aware of as well. And it's so simple, but it's really important that you're aware of this. Now, one of the members of staff at the Bangladesh Bank received an email sometime in January of 2015, and in that email it was an application from a local man, Razel Alam. He was looking for a job. Now, included in the email was a link to their resume and cover letter to download. Seems simple. Someone looking for a job at a bank. They enclose a link to their resume and their cover letter. Now, when the link was clicked, the malware was installed on the bank's computers. Now, it's believed that this was not left to chance. It's believed that there were a number of different emails from different addresses with different links that they may have used to ensure that at least one link was clicked that would install the malware on the banking computers. And because they're networked, it would install on all of them. Now, this was essential that this malware was installed for the heist to take place, because it basically stopped the software from automatically printing the SWIFT instructions. Another bank in Vietnam that was involved in this, a great big circle of banks, and there's so many that I haven't included them all, but the malware in that case was apparently installed in a PDF reader that the bank used. So even if it's a PDF document, don't click links from people that you do not know, even if it is a PDF. So the attack not only shook the foundations of Bangladesh banking system, but also the worldwide banking system, as a total of $81 million was stolen all up by the hackers that couldn't be located, making this the largest bank heist in history. Now, a significant amount of money, but thankfully less than the $1 billion that they had attempted to get away with, had it not been flagged first by the word Jupiter and then the spelling mistake in foundation. The robbers never even set foot in the bank in order to carry out this heist. It was all done by computer. Although some people have been rounded up, the main instigators of this hack have not been located, but there are strong suspicions. Kaspersky Lab, a Russian cybersecurity company, actually traced an IP address used in the attack from a European server to a North Korea server, making the link between North Korea and the hacking. Now, North Korea is an isolated and surprisingly poor country. Despite that, it is said to be extremely good at computer hacking, often with people trained in China, one of its close trading partners. Now, once they've been trained, they return to North Korea to carry out hacking on behalf of the government in many cases. So over the years, it's been claimed that North Korea is responsible for many malicious cyber activities, including ransomware attacks, hacking, and cryptocurrency threats. One of the main groups credited with these activities is known as the Lazarus Group. The Lazarus Group actually has several names: Guardians of Peace, Hui's team, and according to Wikipedia, they are a cybercrime group run by the government. It was recently said to be responsible for the theft of 100 million in crypto assets from Harmony, a blockchain startup company, and it's claimed that in June of 2022 they managed to transfer crypto assets from Harmony and other blockchains. Now, federal prosecutors in the US also believe that Lazarus were the brains behind the bank robbery, and they noted that there were many similarities between similar style cybersecurity attacks, including the attack on Sony Pictures in 2014. And it was discovered that some of the malware in the Sony hack was similar to that of the Bangladesh bank hack. However, many believe that this could just have been planted as a ploy to blame Lazarus, and really there is another hacking group at play. Lazarus is also said to be responsible for hacks on pharmaceutical companies, cybersecurity researchers, online games, ransomware attacks, and much more. And the US Department of Justice indicted 2 hackers believed to be members of the Lazarus Group in 2021 for a number of these attacks, which were said to be aimed at gathering intelligence and funds for North Korea. They said, as laid out in today's indictment, North Korea's operatives using keyboards rather than guns, stealing digital wallets of cryptocurrency instead of sacks of cash, are the world's leading bank robbers, according to Attorney General John Demarais of the Justice Department's National Security Division. They also charged a Canadian man with helping the Lazarus Group launder money. But no one as yet has been held directly responsible for the Bangladesh bank heist. And quite frankly, if you live in North Korea, you are pretty well out of reach for the rest of the world. So, as at today's date, no one really knows who committed the Bangladesh bank heist. But most people believe it's a Lazarus Group based out of North Korea, and as such it was sanctioned by the North Korean government. Who knows if that is true or not? Cybersecurity is so complicated and so complex, and it's such a weird world that we live in. And I don't know if anyone will ever actually be brought to justice with this. But it just seems amazing that $1 billion could have been taken, which would have a terrible and horrific knock-on effect for the rest of the world, not just Bangladesh. And they would have got away with it had it not been for one, a spelling mistake, and one, the bank that they selected had an address that was automatically triggered in the US system. Had they chose any other bank in any other street, maybe they would have got away with the 980 million. You know, maybe the world would be a different place because of that. But I don't know. So isn't it amazing that a bank robbery or a bank heist can now be committed without anyone walking into the bank? The days of people walking in with ski masks on are just over, and now it's sophisticated. This would have taken years to plan. The fact that the malware was planted so far in advance, and those 4 bank accounts in the Philippines were created so far in advance, it just goes to how sophisticated and how well planned these things are to coordinate the day of the attack to make sure it's on a weekend, and the different time zones and the public holiday in the Philippines. It's amazing how well planned and thought out these things are to come undone by a spelling mistake and a trigger word for the US system. So I think if we can learn one thing from this particular case today, it's always be really careful what links that you ever click in an email. I won't click any link. So if you ever send me things in Messenger and whatnot, and it says click this link to look at my picture, no, I won't. I got a text the other day from my brother-in-law, just with a link to look at something on Instagram. Not looking. And I asked him later when he rang, I said, did you send me this? And he said, yeah. I'm like, no, didn't click it. I don't click links, and I certainly don't click links from people that I don't know. So always look in your email inbox, check the address, see if it's someone that you know before you click anything or download anything. You never know what hidden viruses there might be in the computer system. Unfortunately, that is the way of the world nowadays. So I'd love to know what you think about this case. If you want a really in-depth look of it, the BBC did a huge podcast on it. It's an 8-series podcast on it. I'll put a link to it below. Sorry, it's a 10-episode series, and it's called The Lazarus Heist. They pretty well obviously believe that Lazarus is the culprit. At the moment, no one has been convicted of this. So at the moment, we'll just put that there as a suspicion. For the sake of the half an hour of this video, I did cut out a lot of information that was not needed to tell the story. So a more in-depth view would be with the BBC 10-part series. So that's it from me. I hope you have a good weekend, and that's it for my finished pineapple picture. And until next time, stay safe, don't click on links, and happy colouring.